Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Welcome to STEM Unplugged, a monthly podcast designed to help you learn about STEM initiatives and advance STEM awareness. I'm your host of the show, Kelly Green, the Chief Operations Officer of SciTech Institute, a collaborative nonprofit organization making STEM connections in Arizona and beyond. Unfortunately, today in the studio, I do not have my co-hosts, Chief Science Officer of the Year, Chalet, or Chief Science Officer of the Year from this past year, Valentina. Due to COVID, they're all, out and about and doing schoolwork. They're back in session. But I do want to express the gratitude to our guests today. In this episode of STEM Unplugged, we will be exploring ways STEM rocks. And we have guests on, including Angie Harmon from Freeport McMoRan. And we have also Molly Radwini, is that her?
Radwini, yep.
Oh, you're going to have to introduce it a little bit better than I just did. I'm so sorry. We have Julia Potter and Maria Bertram. So I would like to kick it over to Angie Harmon, talk a little bit about Freeport McMoRan and a little bit about what your role is as the Regional Community Development Manager for North America. And then, send it over to Molly and introduce why you invited them to be guests as well.
Sure. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks for the introduction, and I'm glad to be here with everyone today. As Kelly shared, my name is Angie Harmon, and I'm with Freeport McMoRan.
Oh, I said it wrong.
We often have the name of our company. It just looks a little different than it sounds, but it is McMoRan. The Mac, Mo, and Ran are for three people who were the founders of the company. And so it is Freeport McMoRan, and we are a mining company. We're headquartered in Phoenix. We're an international company and have operations in North America, South America, and Indonesia, and then exploration all over the place. So a global company with our roots here in Arizona and in Phoenix, and it definitely aligns with the topic for the podcast today of why STEM rocks, because we deal with rocks all the time. And really glad to be part of the company. We have a great panel of women here today, and a couple of us are more technical STEM experts, and others of us just have the privilege of working for a company that rocks STEM. So my role is I am the Regional Community Development Manager for Freeport. I've been with the company for 17 years. I didn't know about mining prior to starting with the company. And since then, I've been able to travel to our mines all over the world and literally go to the bottom of an open pit mine and look up and just kind of see what the amazing stuff is that happens there on a daily basis. In the community development space, I work with our team at our company. We have a whole team in our community development area, and we engage with the communities where we operate. We are a place-based industry. We are in community, and we are part of community, our employees and our company. And so that includes interacting with the community. We have regular formal engagement with communities, and our team on the ground are informally engaging with our community partners all of the time. It also includes our social investment. So how do we give back in through what we're able to earn as a company, and how do we engage with communities to be there while we're mining, and then also build the capacity and resiliency of those communities so that they become strengthened and they have the ability to live on much beyond us. And so through the social investment side, I've had the opportunity to partner with women in mining and be able to be the go-between with Freeport McMoRan and the Women in Mining chapter in Arizona. You'll hear a lot more about it from the rest of the panel, but Women in Mining is not just in Arizona. There is a national organization, maybe even international, you guys will have to share. But we are really glad to be a supporter of the Women in Mining Arizona chapter and the work that they're doing. getting more women into the workforce and in the mining industry is a priority of our company, and being able to partner with organizations that are supporting that and providing the opportunities to bring women together and provide resources and just build them up is an important part of that. So figured it would be great to have them as part of this discussion today because they're a part of making STEM rock too.
Absolutely.
So with that, I'll turn it over to Molly so she can introduce herself and the rest of her group.
Thank you.
Sure. So I'm Molly Radwini. I'm the secretary for the Women in Mining Arizona Chapter. It's basically a nonprofit group. The chapter started only 2 years ago. And there is a national organization that we're a part of. And really our purpose is just about increasing the visibility of women in this industry and providing support and networking opportunities for women. And we've also really expanded to try and include any underrepresented groups. So we're really interested in bringing in, people from different backgrounds, maybe like other lower income or underrepresented groups into our organization. Julia is the president and Maria is the vice president.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us today. I think one of the cool things you mentioned, Angie, that not all people have experienced in why mining rocks is that you actually get to go down in the pit. So I had the opportunity to go down into the Bisbee mine with our students and had a bunch of engagements with the geologists and Freeport, a bunch of individuals that worked with the mining. And I also visited Baghdad, Arizona. So the idea of the community involvement and, how the organization, your company really focuses on community was really powerful. So Molly, to hear you say you are looking to get underrepresented and, groups into mining and understanding that there's a lot of different ways you could be part of mining, not only in Arizona, but around the world. So, Julie, you want to tell us a little bit about you and, why you're the president of that organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started out in geology. I graduated from the University of Wisconsin with a degree in geology and history. And then I got into engineering a little later. I've got a master's in engineering. I work for a local engineering firm here in Tucson called Collin Nicholas. And I love mining. I love rocks. I love geology. I've been lucky to work in this industry for about 10 years. And I am one of very few females at my company and in the industry in general, especially in the science and technical side of things. So I first joined WIM because I wanted to meet other women, come in contact with people in similar situations. And it's been a great experience. I've made really great friends, several of whom are on this call today, and also managed to get involved in outreach activities I never would have known about without it. And it's been really fun being a part of the leadership as well.
Yeah, we'll come back to that role reversal and, engaging in conversations as the only female.
We're not hearing you, Kelly.
Oh, no.
But just so everyone knows, when you hear us refer to WIM, that is Women in Mining. So that's the acronym when you're hearing WIM.
Thanks, Angie.
Yeah,
it's
no
easy
problem.
to forget that.
Yeah.
What about now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, we're just going to go ahead and change mics. I get the big boom mic back. Okay. So what I was saying, we'll definitely come back to that role as a woman in a male dominant field. So we'll come back to that if we hear a little bit from Maria. What about you, Vice President, Madam Vice President? What can you tell us about you?
I have a little bit of a different story. I am not a woman in a mine, but I am still a woman in mining. I actually work as a recruiter with Freeport. Like Angie, I did not know anything about mining when I got here, but I am just in love with the industry and all it has to offer. Everything, just the enormity of it and the vital resources that it provides to the world. And so I actually work in college recruiting specifically. So I go out to universities and represent the company and try to encourage all students to really think about mining. And for a lot of them, even people who go to schools with mines in their name, if you ask them, oh, have you considered a career in mining? They say, no, I really haven't. And so we're there to kind of tell them all the great opportunities that they can get from the mining industry. And so that's part of what drove me to join Women in Mining, was just that I was especially noticing on campus, talking to females, that it was just really foreign to them, the idea of coming and working in mining. And, what does it have to offer them? Is it just going to be dirty and grimy and
rocks?
They also have a very outdated view. They see the pickaxe and the donkey. They don't see the innovation behind mining. So that's what we're there to do, is to kind of introduce them to mining in the 21st century. And then I just love being a part of WIM, like Julia said, for the community. The people are great. I have close to 200 members all across the state in all different pieces of the industry and corners of the industry. So it's a great network. It's a great community, and it's just full of great people.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think, that's one of the big deals about STEM, right? The perception of STEM. But Angie, you alluded to perception in mining. So can you talk a little bit about, what are some of those perceptions? Maria mentioned the pickaxe and the donkey.
Right.
What are some of the things that have changed?
Yeah, I think that over the years, as we've done outreach and different things, I remember doing one time, a teacher's outreach at the zoo, and a teacher came to our booth and said, "Oh, I didn't realize there was still mining in Arizona." And, that's a tough thing to hear when you're working. Arizona is one of the largest states with mining in the country. And so it shows that we have work to do. And I think it helps you understand that we can't make assumptions, that just because we're in it every day and we understand the vital need for the resources that are provided through mining, it's not everyone's world, and they don't understand it, and it's not their fault for that. And it speaks to, how do we play a role in that, and making sure that they understand now it isn't what you. Even going to Bisbee and doing the underground mine tour there, a lot of communities are so proud of their mining heritage, which is awesome. And, the stories and the people in our companies who are 5th, 6th generation miners, it's amazing. But I think even in those situations, helping people to understand that we have made so many improvements on processes since, how it used to be, and hearing the stories and hearing how things used to be those are great things to hear, as long as we're also understanding the environmental responsibilities that are, now part of the mining industry. And, I think along those lines, it's interesting too, because we hear things in the news about the EPA being rolled back and all of these different laws changing, and, less restrictions and that sort of thing. And from a mining perspective, it's important for us to communicate with our stakeholders that there might be some changes, but these are still all of the things that we're following in order to effectively mine and do that in a responsible way. So I think it's really around that responsibility piece. From a Freeport perspective, there's so many things that we do that are voluntary, that are, they're not things that are required of us, in addition to doing all of the things that are required. And so I think there's, some of that aspect of things. And then, kind of relevant to the topic today is there used to be mindsets, and, maybe there still are, that women didn't belong in mines, particularly in underground. And I think that all of those things are perceptions that could be out there, that could still be around, or because it's the only experience and exposure people have had is what they think mining is like today.
Absolutely. And I think that's featured in, TV shows or even movies that, the perception that, it's dangerous work. Myself, I served in the military for over 20 years, and the idea that I wasn't supposed to be a female in combat. It's the same thing that, do you really want your women going down to the base of the mine and maybe not returning for dinner? I think that was a perception and not that long ago. So the fact that you've been with the company for 17 years speaks to, if you imagine when you first joined and not knowing much about mining, right? Until how respected you are now after 17 years. When we advocate for young women who want to pursue a STEM career, we need to be mindful of those perceptions, because it might be their parents or their grandparents that are still pretty powerful influencers of their future. So, Julia, I was looking at your background, right? So not only a geologist, which is not predominantly female career from, 20 years ago, but also geotechnical engineer and 3D block modeling. Tell me, what does that mean?
So my specialty is working with data. I'm a geostatistician, I guess you could say. I look at for mines like Baghdad, for example, where you've been, data collected from drill holes and the material properties of the ground. And then I take that information and I model it in 3 dimensions so that we can plan open pit mine slopes or underground mine design based on what we know from the data that we've collected.
That's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
I'll just say, I sat on a scholarship review for women in mining, and Julia did a masterful job with all of this. And during the review, she had to pull up something to show us how people kind of spell out. And this thing showed up on her computer that was it was, talk about a foreign language. There were so many numbers and so many sheets and so many layers, and it was just amazing. And I was just in awe of the fact that she had any idea what to do with any of it. So
thank you.
The data, she does.
Glorious for either coding a Python script for something that you don't necessarily expect her to do that, or she'll make some crazy Excel sheet. And this is for, for our nonprofit, or, for the scholarship.
Don't be mad. She makes it fancy, right?
The annual report,
the graphic design.
The graphic design was done by Julia. So I think it speaks to the fact that Julia is a great example of what women bring to the table, and that generally is a wide skill set. We a lot of times have to have a lot of balls in the air and juggle them and figure out how to do it, and that means having more than one thing that you can do well at. And I think just that example right there is that's the value of having women in your workforce.
Absolutely. I think that would probably speak to Maria.
I do think too that what's funny is all of that is just kind of the result of my love of computers, which is the thing I didn't really discover until almost after college. So for me, it just didn't seem like a thing that I could be good at or would be good at. And then in my job, I was given the opportunity to kind of be creative and solve problems my own way. And suddenly I'm graphic designing on the side. And, Molly and I are working on Python scripts together, during the day, trying to troubleshoot stuff. So part of the exciting thing about mining is there often isn't a right way to do things. So you kind of have to, because we're, every place we go is somewhere new. So we're always problem solving and thinking of new ways to do stuff. And often that involves, really cool computer science.
So I was alluding to the fact that Maria probably has a bunch of people skills, right? If you're a college recruiter and going out and talking to students and really promoting what the company has to offer, I think that's important for people to understand. It's a package, right? Be well-rounded, learn how to communicate, learn how to be in social situations, but also have a passion, right? Julia, you love the computer and you've learned all of these cool techie tricks. But Maria, what would you say to those students that are, going to be applying and well-rounded skills?
So really what we look for in our internship program are those soft skills that you're talking about. We trust that the universities that we're recruiting from are giving them the technical knowledge that they need. We know the U of A is always going to give us a great mining engineering student, a great civil engineering student, any of the STEMs, any of the business even. And really what we're testing them on is, can they communicate? Can they work on a team? Can they take direction?
Mm-hmm.
Can they think innovatively? And, those are really the things that we're looking for in an intern, because we use our internship as our pipeline to full-time employment. So we are hiring all of our entry-level talent through our internship program. And so when I hear Julia talk about, how she has to think creatively in mining, those are the kind of messages that we're trying to share with students is, you're not going to just be stuck in a cubicle all day with a bunch of other engineers. You're going to be working with the operator. You're going to be working with the haul truck driver. You're going to be working with the senior engineer, with the health and safety department. It's a very social STEM industry, unlike a lot of other STEM fields.
Molly, you're serving as an intern right now, correct?
I've learned a lot being an intern. I was actually an intern for Freeport for the spring semester, and now I'm an intern for Colin Nicholas, which is the company that Julia works for. So it's really been great to get so many different experiences in the industry. And when I was working for Freeport, I was on a mine site, and it was actually really fun, and I loved it. I loved being on the mine and just getting dirty and getting up super early. It was just fun because you have a real sense of purpose and camaraderie, and you know that you're doing something for a reason and everything's always changing. So that was a really fun experience. And then since the summer, I've been working with Colin Nicholas, and I've been doing pretty similar things as what Julia explained earlier with just working with the data. And that's been awesome too, because it really does bring out your creative side. You wouldn't think that it would,
right?
Because, normally you think of working with data would be kind of just plugging and chugging numbers, but there's a lot of, working with imagery and working with software, and even creating figures and stuff that actually does kind of use your creative side. And that's something I've never had before in other kinds of jobs.
That kind of brings me back to the importance of partnerships to lead change, right? And I really appreciate that you are all willing to get on the call today. We have a partnership with Freeport and really promoting STEM in Arizona. Angie, can you talk a little bit about why that's so important to the company to really lead change? And as you mentioned, promote Maria going out and talking about opportunities in mining?
First of all, change can only happen if there's enough people at the table. It can't change. We can't do change alone. And so the partnerships are critical for doing that. And I think there's so many different just phases of change and leading. And you have to have the people at the table at the right time to be able to bring their skill set and what they can to the equation. Change is hard too. You have people that don't want change, that don't want to see change. And, when that's the case, you have to figure out how do you bring them along? And you don't push them, you pull. And you have to have people that can have those skills to do it. I think, one of the things that's sometimes is, speaking as a non-technical person in a STEM field, I think sometimes it's hard because, we don't have to have an engineering degree, or it's not as you do this, this, and this. And, that's not to say that everything that an engineer does or, more of a technical person does is just scripted and you just follow these steps, because that's not the case. But I think a lot of times when you're in a softer skill, there's this belief that, oh, that's easy stuff. You don't need any sort of specific skill or ability to do that. But I think when you talk about some of these things around bringing change, working with communities to build their resiliency, helping them to understand that, what are some of the opportunities? What are the strengths that they have in their community? How do they come together to build upon those strengths? How, which all does lead to change. There are skills that are required to do that. They might be a little different, but we need to be able to pull those out of everyone. And even if we only look at it internally from a company perspective, and how do we do that? How do we help the general manager at our operating site, along with the environmental manager and, all of the different people who bring these different skills to the table together to partner to understand that this is an important aspect of what we're working on too.
Yeah, I think a few of you alluded to it in your guest form about why is it important for each of us to speak to that and have that opportunity for women in mining, example, at your organization. Why should the company have a space for females to gather and then be able to be at the table? Lisa, you want to talk about that?
I have to say that, my involvement with WIM was a huge part, and I can just speak to being an employee and also being that has bosses, and works for a company. My involvement in WIM is what got Colin Nicholas, my company, involved in WIM. And my bosses, once they had this excuse to jump on board or this reason to get behind it, they really got into it, and they volunteered on several of our for events, for our scholarship judges committee, things like that. And that has meant so much to me personally, but I also know it's meant a lot to the other women at CNI. And I think the happier that your employees are and the more supported they feel, the easier it is to get more women or other underrepresented people to come work for you. And I also have to say that Freeport's been, more so than any other company, extremely supportive of WIM, Angie personally as well. And Freeport is one of my biggest clients. And that's big too. That means a lot too, going to client sites, and knowing that this company's on board. So right. I'm going to feel, comfortable as a woman in mining, talking about my geostat or whatever it is, So I think it's really important from that standpoint, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand the engineering aspect that Angie alluded to, and that it doesn't have to be that you're a female engineer. You're an engineer, and walking into a room and building that confidence. And I know, that's what we're really trying to embody with our chief science officers and with all the students that we engage with, that you don't have to be a female engineer. You can just be an engineer. And, really identifying that when you're at the table, you are representing the engineer aspect and what needs to happen in a discussion or a working group. So leading that change, I really respect that you ask them to get involved, and now they're wholeheartedly supporting it. I think that speaks volumes to your leadership and, knowing that you had the courage to say, hey, this is something I want to do as your employee. Do you support me? And they did. That's really excellent. So I think that's important for all of us to remember. We all have a voice, and, the fact that we're all women on a call, STEM Unplugged, talking about mining and how STEM rocks, speaks to where we've come, in a long way in the nonprofit sector as well, is really identifying that, we have an opportunity to engage with the public, let them know that there are opportunities for them to get involved. So let's talk a little bit.
Kelly, I think before we go to the next question, just to add on about your question around, making space for women, and it's not an option anymore. It has to happen, and figuring out how to increase other underrepresented groups in the workforce is not an option. And it becomes, somewhat challenging. Sometimes we're a place-based industry. And so we might be in communities where there's expectations of having a certain representation. And if we have if our focus is on, hiring from a local community, balancing all of that out. But it just is, we have to make space. We have to make sure the space is safe. And we have to figure out, again, it's that change piece of how do you bring folks on board who might not have the same feeling about it, but it's not an option.
Yeah, I think as we're all in different stages in our career, understanding that having those tough conversations with people who aren't really ready to listen is something we have to continue to strive for. So, I even face it, currently is this idea of let's make sure we're representing those that we serve and understanding that those we serve don't necessarily look at us and say, oh, that's me in 10 years. So under, getting rid of the niceties and really saying exactly what you said, Angie, it's no longer an option. Let's make sure we have, everybody feeling like they can walk up to the table and participate. So, oh, go ahead.
If I could add to, just from a recruiting perspective, I talk to candidates every single day, anyone from a college student to a truck driver to a laborer. And when I think, when we look at our demographic breakdown, and like Angie said, the focus on hiring from the local communities, sometimes it's hard because the local community does, might lack that diversity perspective. And for a hiring manager, they're not acting out of malice when they hire the local person over the person who might live in a couple states away but is from an underrepresented population. They're just looking for someone who they hope will stay, and will like the community. And so I think that part of what it is a retention part on the side of, once we get them, once we tell them all the great things about engineering and the mining industry and we get them to come here, what can we do to make all people feel comfortable there and feel like they can make a home there and a career there, and you feel like they want to stay. And so I can go out to a college and recruit, as many diverse candidates as possible. But in the end, what can we do in our communities and with our employees to make them feel like this is home for them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think really understanding too what I witnessed when I visited, Baghdad, for example, that it was a sense of community when I drove into the town, it was last summer, but the idea that 4th of July was going to be this huge community event, the whole town was going. Yeah. And, I went and visited the community pool and all of the great aspects that were actually laid out in the entire community. It really took me back to living on base as a military individual. I was like, wow, they have everything they need right here. And that's special because, I grew up in a small town, and I'm going to ask you all, what do you do for fun? And, how do you keep yourself, contained, but safe and happy during quarantine? But really understanding that it really does mean something when you feel like you're part of a community, you feel respected, you feel like it's safe, especially if you're going to have a family and children there. So retention is important because, as you all know, it's not like 20, 30 years ago where people pick a career and stay in it for 20. So understanding that they can choose to leave, but you really do want them to stay, especially after putting that effort in. So yeah, what are you guys doing? How are you feeling at quarantine? What does mining look like when you're not at the bottom of the pit? What are you guys doing? And anybody, feel free.
A lot of this. A lot of Zoom.
Doing a lot of Zooming.
Yeah, a lot of Zoom.
A lot of computer stuff. I mean, there's definitely people who are still working in the field and working in the mines. And, I've worked in the mine just for a couple of weeks after the quarantine kind of started. And, they have to adapt to some changes. I think, Freeport kind of put in a few policies, like only 2 people in a truck at one time. And, they were giving out hand sanitizer and all of that stuff. So the people at sites, I'm sure they're adapting to those kind of new rules and everything. And yeah, I'm just working from home.
Probably puts a damper on the whole rock aspect, right? You want to touch it and, build with it. So
I haven't seen a rock in months.
Well, and I think within the mining industry, and I can only speak from a Freeport perspective, but safety is the number one value within our company. When you're driving a haul truck that is taller than a house, you can't put safety less than top of the list of what we need to be focusing on.
Absolutely.
And so I think in some ways, adapting to COVID might have been easier for some of the mine sites than in some of the industries where safety isn't something that's part of their culture and part of their DNA. I'm not saying there wasn't a lot of thought put in it. We have a medical director who has a ton of experience and has been able to guide the direction on what the company needed to do. And thankfully, they acted quickly. It hasn't been easy from some of the impacts. I think we had a mine site that had some, thankfully, across our portfolio. We only had one. It'd be better if it was none that had any number of COVID exposures that it impacted the ability of the mine to operate. We do have operations in South America, and Peru and Chile had different ways that they managed the outbreak, Indonesia as well. And so just figuring out across that portfolio what needed to be done to keep both our employees and our community safe, because that's the way you lead. That's something that you have to do. And again, especially in a small town where you make up a lot of the people who live in a community, either through your employees or your contractors or whatever it might be, you have an obligation to do that. And so it was, what do we do for our employees? How do they take that home? What are the different aspects that need to be put in place while still, we can't stop mining copper, because then you can't build cars and you can't make solar panels and you can't do the things that the world needs to just continue to operate.
Yeah, that actually leads me to my next question of, why is copper so critical to the greener future? And you kind of mentioned, some of the things, but touch on it a little bit more, Angie. What is Arizona, leading right now in copper mining?
Right. I'll jump in and, you guys, if you have more information, but when you think about a greener world or the things that we look at for related to that, copper's in all of it. There's more copper in a electric vehicle than in a traditional vehicle. There's all kinds of things like that just continue to make copper more and more relevant. You can recycle copper endlessly. It's, continuously recyclable, but there's not enough copper to be recycled to meet the demand that we would need for all the stuff that we need. And so I think, that's an important message, because even if we think about it from the perspective of not how much copper's in more green technology, but people don't understand that copper is needed to turn on your light and to, make your cell phone work and your computer work and, all of that sort of thing. It's just such a fundamental thing to just society in general. And as we look at that, there's some countries that are, continuing to build out their infrastructure. That's an important need for copper as well, as they're doing that sort of thing. So I'll turn over to Julia and Molly and Maria if you guys have other specific copper uses.
I was just going to point out one of the other things that's big right now during COVID is copper's antimicrobial properties as well. It's one of the safest metals to be using when dealing with bacteria and germs. So you see hospitals start to say, hey, why do we have stainless steel door handles? Maybe we should change that to copper. Maybe these counters should be copper, just to reduce spread of viruses. That was Julia.
She's like, now your turn.
It is antimicrobial.
It is.
That's actually what I was going to say. It's a hot topic right now.
Yeah, it's all the rage these days.
Yeah, there's a lot of medical uses for it. But yeah, it's an excellent conductor. It's antimicrobial. Copper's in everything. And copper byproducts are also very important, especially to green energy. Like Angie already mentioned, solar panels, electric cars need things like copper, cobalt, and other elements in order to, for our country to continue trying to be as green as possible. Copper is necessary. And I think Arizona is like the 7th largest copper producer in the world. If we were a country, just Arizona would be the 7th largest. So it's a huge part of our economy. A lot of the jobs in Arizona are copper based. People working at mines or in producing and refining copper. So it's a really big deal to the world, but especially to Arizona.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Yeah, I think, as we near the hour, I just really wanted to, kind of ask you all for one more piece of advice, one more share out of, not only what do you enjoy about your career in mining, but what advice would you give to not only young females or even, females looking to change their career, because that could happen as well. But what advice would you give to someone seeking an opportunity in mining? So is there anybody who'd like to start? We can, toss it that way, but I want to give you that opportunity to really make your final call to action or plea to our listeners and whoever's going to listen to the podcast efforts. We're off the air, but yeah, what would you say? Lisa, you want to go first?
Not to plug WIM, but honestly, I can't tell you how many opportunities I've been a part of connecting people to just because of my involvement in WIM. So a friend's looking for a job. I heard another friend that's involved in WIM, but not just WIM, any organization. SME is another huge professional organization in the mining industry. It's the Society of Mining, Metallurgy. Oh, shoot.
And Exploration.
And Exploration. Thank you. But getting involved in those kind of groups can really just up your exposure and help you get to know the people and make connections and also just learn about the industry. And I can't stress enough how important that is to finding opportunities.
That's awesome.
I guess I would say something that I talk to students a lot about is when they're out looking for their first job, their first career, is look for a company that speaks to your values. And that's one thing that I personally really like about working at Freeport is that I know where they stand on the environmental issues and the social justice issues, and that they're really trying, putting all their effort into being safe and producing copper responsibly. Working at a mining company, it's, maybe an inherently unsustainable, industry. So what can we do to make that as sustainable as possible? And that's really the call to action that Freeport has really stepped up to the plate for. So for students looking for jobs, look on their website, what do they say about diversity? What do they say about the environment? What are they spending in their communities? Those are things that you should be thinking about when you're committing to your first company.
Excellent advice. Molly or Angie?
I would say, my advice, kind of keep an open mind when you're thinking about your career. I think I probably always wanted to do mining, but I think that for a long time I thought that I couldn't, that I wasn't strong enough or that I wouldn't be able to do it because they're all in remote locations or something like that. And a lot of those assumptions that we kind of just tell ourselves are not necessarily true. So definitely, that's why I think, it's good to network and talk to people and to also just be able to see people who, have something in common with you that you can figure out whether, oh yeah, actually, I guess I could do that. I remember for a long time, I would not apply to any entry-level geology jobs in mining because they all said you have to be able to lift 50 pounds. And I was like, I don't know if I can lift 50 pounds. And then one day I just was talking to this girl and she was a fairly, she wasn't super buff. And so I was like, hey, how'd you get this job? Can you lift 50 pounds? She was like, yeah.
She's in the pet store lifting up the dog food bags.
Molly, I feel like how much does your 3-year-old weigh?
She only weighs 30 pounds. So.
Oh, okay. I was going to say.
But yeah, so keep an open mind. You're probably more capable than you think you are.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think don't discount anything. Don't think I can't do mining because I'm a woman, or I can't do mining because of this. I think we do have to, if something is of interest to us, we have to try for it. And I think that's something that people should just have an open mind about. And, what is that? And don't limit yourself. I think Molly's story that's probably like a requirement that we have to put on the job description from some lawyer. And here we hear that it's potentially preventing somebody from wanting to apply for a job for us. So think about those systems and those processes and those things that are in place that might be, keeping good people joining in the good fight, And when I applied, so this is 17 years ago, I applied and the company it wasn't Freeport at the time, it was our predecessor company, but they had an online process for screening folks. And so I submitted my information and I got a decline. And I was like, oh, darn. And then I had found out the contact and had sent my resume directly. And she reached out and she's like, well, I want to interview you, but we have this online process. And I was like, yeah, I used that online process. I didn't know. Was I supposed to tell her that I already was declined by the online process? Just say that I'd been part of the online process. So I think, and here I am 17 years later in the role and good at the role, so they would have missed out if they would have followed through the process. So settle, I guess, is another part of it. If there's something that is, what you want to do and it's, you feel that it's the thing for you, then stick with it and figure out, okay, so if it's not the first time, find out, well, what was it that I need to strengthen and work on that and just, stick with it and get to what it is you want to do. And I think everyone's kind of said it, find advocates for you. I think especially for young people, find an advocate because there's lots of us out there and, we don't know that you need it or you want it unless you ask. So figure out ways to do that.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid of the no. Somebody said no, but you could have 3 yeses somewhere else. So try again. Absolutely. To our listeners, we encourage you to get involved in the STEM community. Maybe you're an industry professional seeking ways to make an impact, a student searching for a mentor, or a community collaborator hoping to meet the right people to help make it happen. We want to definitely share one way they can get in touch with you, Angie.
My email, I can give them my email. It's aharmon at F as in Freeport, M as in McMoRan, I as in incorporated.com.
Awesome. What about you, Molly? How can people get in touch with you?
People can definitely add me on LinkedIn and feel free to message me there if you're interested in getting involved in the mining industry. My name's Molly Radwini, so you can find me on LinkedIn for sure.
Perfect. What about you, Maria?
Yeah, I'd say LinkedIn as well. I'm pretty active on there. And I would also say if you're looking for an opportunity to work in the mining industry with Freeport, our website is fmjobs.com.
Perfect. And Julia, not Lisa, Julia.
Yeah. LinkedIn for me as well. I'm Julia Potter on LinkedIn. And then also, actually, if you email to Arizona Chapter at womaninmining.us, go to Molly, Maria, and I. So you can hit all 3 of us at once via email if you're interested in getting involved and or knowing more about WIM.
That's awesome. Well, I want to thank all of you for being on the call today. And, thank you for joining us on this episode of STEM Unplugged, exploring ways STEM rocks. So we appreciate all of you for being on the show. And if you'd like more information, contact us at SciTechInstitute.org. This is your host, Kelly Green, and we would be glad to discuss how you can get connected.